Yeah, man.
Hiya, Monsters. Now, before we get into the stories, I would like to say thanks to Fearagen. Yes, that's right, Monsters. Tonight's featured narrator is the one and only Fearagen. Be sure to check out his content. Now, there will be a link in the description that's going to take you to his YouTube channel. Monsters, be sure to go check out his content. And there will also be an annotation you can click on at the end of the video. And Monsters, big shouts to you guys, and thanks for watching the video. And so, without further ado, let the stories begin.
Their pale faces were tilted skyward, each pair of eyes brimmed with hope. In the moonlight, their skin seemed luminous, a battle of bright flesh against the surrounding darkness. Their mouths were slightly open, as if expecting to receive a holy communion. They stood in a circle on the mossy ground, hand in hand. Their open throats drooled blood down their young chest. Under my bare feet, the moss felt so comforting, so inviting. With children standing guard, I would curl up on the ground and fall asleep. That was 25 years ago. It was my nightly ritual. I'd sleepwalk to the clearing in the woods outside our home and sleep next to the 5 children. No one noticed I came home at dawn. No one would have cared anyways. After I turned 14, it all stopped though. I assumed it had to have been a recurring dream. Yes, I sleepwalked nearly every night. And yes, I spent those nights in the woods, but no children were ever reported missing. There were no slit throats, just trees and moss. Lots and lots of moss. I moved away when I turned 19. As the years went by, the memories grew hazy, as they're wont to do. Certain things triggered them though. Some more strongly than others. Lately, it's been open mouths. The open mouths of the children were always a source of fascination to me. I wasn't put off by their slit throats. I wasn't disturbed by their warm, skyward stare. No, their mouths were the source of my inquisitiveness. I would walk around their circle, moss brushing between my toes, and look inside their mouths. They looked warm and soft, pink tongues and small teeth and narrow throats. When I was 8, I kissed one of the 2 girls, the redhead. Her lips were full and tasted like pine. I felt my breath collect in her mouth and spill back into mine. She didn't move, but my body sang. I tasted pine for years afterwards. No kiss since has ever been so enthralling. The decades pass with a knowing sense of unfulfillment. When my parents died last year, I moved back into their home. It was very much the same. Now I go about my day-to-day business, but the children are still very much in my mind. The softness of the moss against my skin and the sense of protection I had as I slept near them has been impossible to shake. My nostalgia has only grown since returning to the home near where it had all happened. Some nights I walk to the mossy clearing. It's as beautiful as it has always been, especially when the moon is full and I recall it shining against the porcelain skin and bright eyes and wet mouths. I'll curl up on the moss and sob myself to sleep, alone. I've found some solace in cultivating the same moss. It's the only tangible remnant of the comforting time in my life. I've been able to coax patches of it to grow in my dirt floor basement, and that's where I sleep now. There, in the moss, in the comfort of my own home, I can dream again. The dreams are a temporary fix, but better than nothing. They'll be enough until it can happen again, and I know it will. The first child I claimed is a girl with red hair. The bulb in the basement doesn't look like moonlight. Its yellow hue causes her skin to look shallow and sickly. Her eyes are clouded and difficult to keep open. The gaping throat is the same though. The throat keeps the memory real, and before I curl up next to her pinned feet and sleep, I make sure to kiss her open mouth. I fantasize about the pine as the taste of metal coats my tongue.
I lie awake on the wooden floorboards. White dust coated over me, caked heavily under my nails. Every morning is the same. Wake up on the floor. White dust on my hands. Body drenched in sweat. And absolutely no memory of the day before. The only memory I seem to hold are the awful nightmares that replay themselves every night, pulling me into a dark, endless pit of fear. It's always the same dream, so vivid and fresh in my mind, flushing over me like a wave of heat. Flashes of fire, screaming, burning, and that awful smell of rotting flesh swarming around me, more suffocating than the smoke itself. I pick myself off the ground, shaking my head for the dreams of last night. Nothing new, I say to myself as I make my way downstairs. My mother sits at the table, fresh pancakes laid out for my little brother and I. She smiles, pouring the orange juice into ivory porcelain glasses. She always did have an eye for perfection. Take a seat, Marcy. I nod and sit, looking down at my plate. Grabbing the powdered sugar, I sprinkle it carefully over the pancakes, making sure not to spill it on the table, so Mother won't get upset. Marcy, where's Charles? He was supposed to be at breakfast at 7 o'clock sharp. I shrug, still looking at my pancakes. I feel like I haven't eaten in years, but I can only eat when everyone is seated at the table. Pretty old-fashioned, I know. Go get him for me, would you? My mother snaps as she places the orange juice onto the table. I roll my eyes and quickly dart up the stairs, my mind still on those delicious pancakes. I look down at my hand, noticing I never placed the powdered sugar back. Whatever, I say, shoving the door open to Charles' room. Get up, little bro, breakfast is ready. Is this gonna be like an everyday thing? 'Cause you're always late. He rolled over, moaning, and looked at me puzzled. Hungry, sis? He said, shifting his eyes to the powdered sugar in my hand. I forgot to put it back on the table. Come on, I'm starving. Let's go. Then, it happened. A piercing explosion bubbled underneath the floorboards, ripping my body from the ground towards the wall. The powdered sugar flew from my hand, coating the room like fresh fallen snow. A loud roar of flames and smoke barreled through the doors. I squint my eyes through the thick clouds of smoke, searching for Charles. He laid in the corner, torn to pieces as flames engulfed what was left of him. I let out a shriek of terror, my vision blurring as my body tingles, turning ice cold. The rest is a fog, flashes of fire, screaming, burning, and that awful smell of rotting human flesh, more suffocating than the smoke itself. I lie awake on the wooden floorboards. Every day, it's the same nightmare of how I died, on repeat. forever.
My name is not Shane. I just wanted to clarify that right now. 4 months ago, I began my career as a biomedical technician at a local hospital. It wasn't the best paying job, and it was not as close as my last job to home, but it was a start. Getting a foot in the door is the hardest part from what I understand. Anyway, my coworker was really nice, and the rest of the staff at the hospital seemed kind enough, always waving and smiling and never learning my name. I attributed it to being new at first, but even people I saw every week never remembered it. They could remember a once-a-week contract just fine, but me? No. Normally this wouldn't bother me because I have had hard times remembering people's names in the past. It started to bother me, however, when I had every single name memorized and no one had mine. Petty? Maybe. But try it for a few months and tell me if it doesn't get ridiculously annoying and belittling. What was even more strange was that everyone kept calling me the same wrong name. Shane. After a month, I was let loose from the training label and started to move a little more freely around the hospital instead of having to follow my coworker around like a lost puppy. A part of our job is to do repairs on all the equipment, so I have had master code to all key locks and a few keys that will open basically any door in the hospital. In my downtime, I wandered around and explored, opened up random closets in search of lost equipment to better understand the layout of the hospital, and to find a great hideout when I wanted to just sit and watch YouTube videos. A few months of poking around and I was peeking into just about every room I can find, but one day I was looking through this old equipment in the basement storage for a missing ECG machine. I found a door. There was no key, no keypad, no lock, virtually no seams either, and it was on the floor. Once I cleared the clutter away, I squatted down to inspect it. Was it a drain? Nah, it didn't make any sense. Was it access to a sub-basement? Shouldn't be one. All of our plumbing is here and our boilers are outside. Just as I started to run my fingers along the very faint crease, my body cringes from the sound I hate the most.
Shane! Shane!
Yeah, over here. And it's not Shane. Did you find the ECG?
Sure did. Let's test it and make sure it still works.
Days went by, and I couldn't get that strange door out of my head. So I let myself into our records room that has all the blueprints and schematics for the hospital, hoping to find an answer. None. Not one damn mention of anything being underneath the basement storage. No electrical, no plumbing, nothing. Undeterred, I make it a point to keep digging when I have time. I even made a daily alarm on my phone. The next day during lunch, my coworker and I were talking about football and how we couldn't wait for the season to start. Our team was going to be very good this year, you know. Apparently, the guy that I replaced was a huge football fan, tailgated every Sunday and had huge parties for the Super Bowl, that kind of thing. I had never heard anyone talk about him before, so I asked what happened. It seemed like a sour subject because my coworker just mumbled a bit about him not giving any notice and taking another job downtown at a school hospital. Oddly enough, I applied for the same job, but after making it to the final 3 candidates, I was knocked out. Lack of experience, they said. Sorry he skipped out on you like that. What was his name?
Shane.
I live by myself. Super creative opening sentence, right? Well, wrong. In my mind, that takes away the interest factor from someone reading this. Well, anyways, disregard that. This happened to me last night. Now, the house I live in is a beautiful house. Looks like a real-life dollhouse. My grandparents lived in it, and when they passed, I handed it down to my single mother. Now, my mother passed away, but before she did, she lived there alone for a bit, a decade or two. But when she passed, I felt it was only fair to live in it as well. Now, it used to be in pretty pristine shape, but the years have definitely done a number on it. This house had a lot of my childhood things residing within these aging walls. I spent a lot of my time there when I was younger, but now I can call it my own. So yes, I am single as well. I live by myself, like I said. I've never been one to believe in ghosts, really. And from the get-go, this isn't a ghost story. So I'll start with yesterday. It was a regular day. I went to work, I came home, I made myself dinner, I showered, and went to bed. Usually I watch a little bit of TV before I fall asleep, but I always make sure that I turn the TV off before I do. I'm never one to doze off like that without turning it off. Last night I decided to pick up a book, and so I turned on my reading light, and I turned the TV off. I'm pretty far along into the book too. I very much enjoy it. I probably could have finished the whole thing last night. 400 pages is nothing for me. But while I'm mid-page, all the power in the house went off. I must have blown a fuse or something, so I went to check out the fuse box. But before I could reach the fuse box, a white noise-like sound and sensation came over my body. But it sounded like it was coming from my room. So me, idiotically, just ran back into my room without reaching the fuse box. Like I said, I don't get spooked too easily because I don't believe in ghosts. But when I reached my room, there were no lights on. But my TV was on. Not one other electronic was working, no electricity at all. My reading light was off, but the TV was stuck on a static screen. Something drew me closer to it. I was a little frightened just because it was on, with absolutely no other power besides it. The white noise sound from the TV surrounded me, but for some reason, I couldn't take my eyes away from the TV. I was transfixed and paralyzed. I don't remember what my body was doing. All I remember is what I saw. The deeper I looked into the TV, more demons I saw. Not like physical demons like ghosts or anything, but I saw every mistake I ever made. It was like I was being recorded my whole life. I saw my mother and I fighting like we used to fight. I saw me yelling at her, but worst of all, I saw her suicide. I saw her lifeless body dangling from my balcony in the house that I reside in. I saw her blue-purple face. I could see the saliva dripping out of her mouth. It was gruesome, but all the screen showed was the snowy screen, the static. And suddenly, I could feel myself gasping for air. I felt like I was being choked by an invisible noose. I never saw my mother after she committed suicide. I never saw her body. I didn't see her lifeless body hanging. But tonight, I saw it. When I finally regained control of my breathing, I felt a rush of air breeze by me. I can't, for the life of me, explain it. The TV would not turn off. Now the TV suddenly switched to a blank screen, and my room was pitch black at that point. I heard footsteps out near my balcony. I heard silent shuffling. I heard the creaking of my tired house. And then I heard a thud, and what sounded like cracking wood. And then it became quieter, but I could hear a steady rocking sound all through my house. Not only did I see my mom's suicide on the TV, but I think I lived through it too last night. I don't think I can live there anymore. Not after what I saw.
As a usual contact lens user, one of the moments I enjoy the most is getting my salary and being able to finally buy a new, fresh contact. I only had one bad eye, so I just buy one contact every time I need it. I've tried using glasses before, but as I love doing sports, contact lenses just get the trick done in a more comfortable way. Today at work, my eye started itching and getting reddish around the corners where the eye and the contact lens meet, signaling that I needed a new contact lens. After work, I got the keys to my car, went to the store, and just took the usual little pack containing a new vision corrector. I didn't even care for reading the package because I always got the same -1.0 correcting strength. Queuing to pay, I noticed how thirsty I was and greedily took a soda can from the cooler near the cashier. After paying, I refreshed my dry throat and my body responded with a thankful burp. I sporadically had to rub my eyes to get rid of the itching, but it was nothing unusual. I got in my car and took my time to finish off the soda. Then I ignited the engine and made my way home. Of course, the first thing I did after unlocking the door to my small apartment I lived in was going to the bathroom to get rid of my old contact lens. Unwrapping the new one, I carefully placed it onto my cornea. I remember that this process was so desperately hard when I started wearing contacts. Getting it into the right spot and taking it out before sleep were tasks that would take me 15 to 20 minutes. But now, it only takes me 10 to 15 seconds. At least in this, I can confirm that practice makes the master. The sensation of the new lens on my eyeball was great. The surface of the cornea felt so cool and fresh. I just loved it. It was my own eyegasm and I enjoyed it for the few moments I had before starting my home routine. The day went on as usual that afternoon. I got into my kitchen and started preparing a meal with whatever ingredients I could find, which resulted in some tuna with rice. I made a mental note telling myself that I really needed to go to the supermarket tomorrow. I dove into the couch and started the laptop to get my daily dose of live streaming. After an hour, I started to drowse away until falling asleep. I don't really know how much I slept, but I woke up to a strong pulsating sensation in my eye wearing the contact lens. I usually take my lens off when sleeping, but napping for an hour or a little more was never a problem, so I was really surprised by this phenomenon. I got up and went to the bathroom, to the mirror. Blood drained from my face. The contact somehow had started wrapping itself around the cornea of my eye. Fine little moving extensions made their way from the center of my eye into the socket containing it, blood streaming through them like feeding the goddamn lens. In my desperation, I tried to take it off. That wasn't good. A massive pain in the back of my eye came as a result, and a scream erupted from my throat. I started searching for my phone to dial 911, but I couldn't find the damn thing. Meanwhile, the pain increased. I tripped and fell on the floor in agony. I tried to get up as soon as possible, but the pain was so great, I could feel it expanding into my skull. I started screaming as loud as I could, hoping that a neighbor would hear me and notice that something was wrong. I started feeling something making its way through my cornea. The pain was unbearable, and I was only able to gnash my teeth in response, holding my hands to my, for sure, already destroyed eyeball. I started feeling nauseous, and the contents of my stomach were spread on the floor almost instantly thereafter. I couldn't even smell it because my whole body was focused on literally blinding pain. I started crying, which only made things worse. I now could feel whatever was in my eye piercing my pupil. The stinging pain was more than my body and mind could bear. My heart started to beat faster, vision blurred, consciousness started to drift away, and in a far distance I heard a knock on the door. Help was all I heard before everything got black. I woke up in a bed with a massive headache, but the pain in my eye was gone. I looked around and realized I was in a hospital, and then it hit me. I still could see with both my eyes. I was amazed. And not only that, I could see perfectly even with my bad eye. It was wonderful. I was eager to talk to the doctor who was behind such a spectacular deed, and to my satisfaction,
I didn't have to wait long because the door to my room opened and a man with a white coat sat down beside me. I started thanking him for saving me and for saving my eye. In that moment, though, his calm expression broke and he got pale. He told me he wasn't able to save any of my eyes, that the infection took over both eyeballs, which were extracted to save my brain and therefore my life. So here I am, still sitting in the hospital bed because they don't want me to leave yet. I have patches over both my eye sockets. I'm too scared to even see what's below them, and the damn headache doesn't go away.
In 2004, the British government gave me £26,000 as a part of a witness protection program. Now, I was wanted dead by a gang in Scotland. After not being able to pay back a loan shark, I was forced to hit him with a big piece of wood and run. Now, the only place I could go was the police station, and they were aware of the street gang's presence and what they were willing to do for the £20,000 I owed them. Now, long story short, I was given £26,000 to start a new life abroad. Now, after several weeks of being moved around from safe house to safe house. On December 2nd, I was given the £26,000 on a untraceable credit card, and then boarded a private plane to Alaska. It had always been a cool idea to live in some cabin in the woods, only going into town once a week for supplies, having a nice little dog to keep me company. But I'll keep the story short. Now, after another week or so, I had purchased a 2-room cabin for just under $20,000, 3 miles outside of a small town. The cabin came fully furnished and had a working fireplace. Anyway, after 6 months, I was fully set up in town with a job, friends, and even had a dog. Now, this was 10 times better than my old life. As I'm sure you've guessed by the fact I had to use a loan shark, there were real no downsides apart from the cold and the loudness of the trees at night. It had taken me several weeks to get used to the trees rustling and the pattern noises of the birds on the roof at the early hours in the morning. And after about 2 years, thing was great, apart from the thing in the woods. Now, I've never seen it directly up until the summer of 2007, which is when it caught me. I first realized the creature existed in January of 2006. I was out repairing my car's antenna after it froze and snapped the week before, when I saw a trail of footprints leading away from one of my windows. I followed them to a large hole in the ground, about 4 feet wide, which had been poorly filled in. I was a little scared, I admit, but I assume it was my own footprints from the day before. And the hole was just unsettled dirt. I'm an idiot, I know. Anyway, as the days and weeks went by, I had noticed more and more things being moved outside my house. The plant pots being outright smashed against my house. The welcome mat being thrown several feet behind where I usually park my car. Every time I left for work, something would be different. Piles of snow being moved or disturbed. Now, I opted to stay in a friend's house in town for a week while they were on vacation. I called the sheriff and explained what had happened. He said that was strange, and that he'd send a deputy to go check it out. That night, the sheriff came into my friend's house and told me that my front door had been broken down, and that an animal had defecated and urinated on my floor. I was sure it had to be a bear. Now, the sheriff told me that there was a local group in town that would hunt the bear down and kill it for free. I was relieved, and after 2 days, the bear's head was brought back in an opaque plastic bag. I had my door fixed, and within the next few days, my friend had returned and I went home. Nothing bad happened at all for a year. But in mid-2007, I was shoveling coal from a coal bin outside when I heard a tree branch snap behind me. I turned around to see it. Let me describe it. This thing was easily 8 feet tall, covered in gray and black fur and dirt, as well as some snow. It had the body of a werewolf. Now, I know that sounds cliche, but that's all I can compare it to. It's not every day you see a new species. This thing had long arms with what appeared to be claws, pointed ears, and a snout. The closest thing I could relate it to is the werewolf from the Harry Potter movies. In my shock, I dropped the shovel. It made an awful clang against the coal, and that's when its neck snapped around to meet my eyes. It was howling. This thing stared at me before turning its full body to face me. This is the only sign of weakness this monster showed. A scar broadened across its chest. While everything else about it spelled out predator. Its long and ferocious teeth. Long legs that were bent similar to a dog's, made for running fast. This whole encounter lasted about 3 seconds before I dove into my car, which was 5 or 6 feet out. Since I'm isolated, I don't bother locking my car or even taking the keys out. It is a bad habit which has stuck with me. My heart was beating so fast, my engine throttled up and I sped off as fast as I could. It must have hit the back of the car because I heard a thud. The back window was frozen, so I had no idea if it was chasing me. I finally reached town, and since I had left all my money behind in the house, I had to borrow $40 for gas from a friend. He was concerned about my scared and almost crying expressions. I left the second he handed me the money, and I drove off to the gas station down the road. It was then that I drove to the airport. I did not give a shit about my friends or the life I was leaving behind. I had my passport in the glove box, and after several hours I had managed to use my credit card to pay for a flight back to London. Oh, that's my story. That's my nightmare.